I see Dayan and Andy and Ray,
There we go.
John.
This seems to be working.
We're just little
So,
peons. It's not like we're Brightman.
Ooh, ouch. Never heard that before.
whoever's watching the live stream, you missed a glorious intro for technical reasons and issues, the wonders of modern technique. Regardless, welcome one and all.
Reading.
Good evening, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We're live, back together.
Yeah.
Very, very happy to be sitting next to George here at Rex Club, upstairs from Barclay Rex in New York City. Part of our US tour,
Exactly.
rather extensive, I have to
Part
say.
of the fall winter Marifel miracle taking North America by storm.
Very true. I'll be in the US for quite a bit, and thankfully George is accompanying me for parts of the journey. And yeah, so today, New York City.
Yeah.
We had a great start
Tomorrow of the
yesterday.
world. Yeah, we did. Really, it was wonderful. We
We
saw some great.
talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that, but first and foremost, we want to say thank you to
Our host.
our dear friends and hosts here at Barclay Rex, having us in the upstairs private members club, the Rex Club. And we want to lead into this whole show today by talking a little bit about Barclay Rex, given that it's been around for more than 110 years,
Mhm.
in good fashion. And as we always do, we have a blind tasting. However, this time it's only George blind tasting because I had to pick the cigar. So not only will we evaluate and enjoy the cigar together, but in the end, then George can give me grades for my skills in selecting the cigar from the humidor and whether he enjoyed it or not.
Yeah.
But again, thanks everybody for joining. If you have questions, as always, chime in, tune in, make yourselves heard, and good to have you, everybody. I cut my cigar. I'll be lighting up, and in the meantime, George can start talking a bit about either the cigar or Barclay Rex, whatever you prefer.
The first thing I want to say is even before I cut or light, I will say, first of all, it's beautiful. It's got a great hand feel. I don't know if you can see it's this wonderful trunk press, but I'm sort of surprised by the aroma. It's very quiet, is what I would call it. It's not like one of the, sometimes you smell the
wrapper, you
you
mean,
smell
or the foot?
well, no, the foot of the cigar. You smell the foot and you're like, oh, I can't wait to light that up because it's like exploding with floral and earthy. I mean, it could be light and mild or it could be funky, but this one is very like it's not giving away a lot. I'm kind of surprised by that. We'll see what the cold draw is. But anyway, back to our hosts. Which is, it's very nice for them to allow us access here because Rex is a private members only facility. And we actually bounced a bunch of guys out of the way saying, hey, there's a live event going here, scurry back to your massive desks as masters of the universe here in Wall Street. Anyway, so the thing that people should know is that Barclay Rex as a shop is the oldest continuously operating tobacco and cigar store in New York City. And that's a pretty substantial claim. It's founded in 1910. The Nashry family did it. And Barclay Rex, the reason why here, the Rex Club up here, you can see the match has the logo of Rex, who was the founder of Vinnie Nastry's dog. And he was he came here from Salerno in Italy and started his business. It was really a pipe shop then, but he didn't have any money for advertising or promotion or anything like that. So they sewed this gigantic blanket and put it over top of Rex, his Great Dane, and paraded him around down here. And it really started the reputation. And it was called Barclay Rex because the original store was on Barclay Street and Rex was the store mascot. When 50 years ago, when I first started coming to New York, the store had moved to its second location on Maiden Lane. And the feature of the store, which was absolutely outstanding, was that Vincent Nastry, in other words, the founder, could still be found in the window of the shop. Literally, he wasn't making pipes anymore then, but he was doing pipe repairs. And I mean, everywhere people came to see him. And by that time, there were also, of course, a cigar store too. But boy, it was fascinating. And he was a great teacher. His son took over. And then he was a great friend of mine, one of the original Davidoff appointed merchants, among other claims to fame. But he retired and passed control of the business. So Barclay Rex is now a woman-owned business and very progressive. These guys have done remarkable things here, not least of which is building this great facility up here, which I would love to be able to show you, but I think probably violates 16 kinds of privacy regulations for being a member. Anyway, trust me, it's really elegant. And so I will say this. It has a very old world feel at the same time that every aspect of it is very 21st century, very modern. This is a real classic example of what progressive cigar stores need to do to, attract and maintain most elite customers. So here endeth the lesson. Just, we're thankful to be here. They've got a beautifully curated humidor downstairs. If you're ever in the New York City area, this is one of the places that you should not miss. It's very welcoming, great staff. And you don't have to be there. There are other aspects. There are other lounge areas incorporated into the store. So in order to sit and relax and enjoy a cigar, you don't have to be a member of the Rex Club and come off the street. You can just be in the shop or in their little sub-level lounge. So all I'm saying is, if you're a cigar lover and a pipe guy, anything like that, when you come to New York City, get here.
We'll let George kind of light his cigar. Yeah. What I'll do in the meantime is, without showing you any faces or particular people, just gently turn around like parts of the pouch, a little bit of the layout here. So very nicely done. Beautiful materials. I love these gorgeous Rex Club ashtrays here. Yeah. And I'm curious, George, what do you think? Cold draw wise?
Again, super quiet. It's not giving me much, which doesn't have anything to do with necessarily whether it's going to be an enjoyable smoke.
I mean, without jumping the gun, but oh boy, what a different image or different scenery on my palate, and particularly on the retro hill. Once you get this bad boy going, there's nothing tamed down or muted about it anymore.
No, definitely not.
Quite substantial in character. So, off to a very good start, I would say.
So,
and again, show you my cigar here. As George said, a beautiful trunk press here.
Yep.
Sort of a Robusto.
It's longer than a Robusto.
5.5.
It's bigger than a bread box and smaller than an 18-wheeler. It honestly, these days I think a lot of people would say this is a Corona, because it's probably seriously. I mean, that's part of the obesity epidemic of cigars, but because it's essentially, I would guess that the dimensions of this cigar are 5.5 by 46. Maybe 47.
That's one thing that I always find with trunk press.
It's deceptive.
But it sort of misleads you on the perception of the ring gauge. It always feels a touch smaller than what the ring gauge
than what it actually is, which is that's a benefit. Unless you're one of those guys that wants to have a fire hose in your mouth, for a jumbo ring gauge.
Smoke production. It's quite substantial.
Well, so
my cigar.
Number one, it's a beautiful cigar. Number two, it draws essentially effortlessly, but not too loose, so that it's going to get hot. The burn is just so far nice, and where it had, like I said, on the foot of the cigar, gave me almost nothing. The cold draw was like almost like it was asleep. I was worried about what was going to happen, but the minute that you light it and start smoking, it's giving you bountiful flavors.
Any particular notes that you're picking up, or things that strike you as either surprising or
Current with our
familiar?
discussion last night, it tastes a lot like tobacco. I don't know where that's coming from. It's not. It's I haven't gotten any Riverstone, no crushed walnuts, no creme de cassis, nothing. It's just a very boring. No, seriously, it's beautiful. Uh, I hesitate to say this, given how we were making fun last night, but there are baking spice notes in this, right? You got a little. There's sort of a nutmeg thing happening right now.
And just to double check, Mike just put it in the comments. George and I were sharing earpods, so I hope that you guys can hear me all right. George should be much better audio wise.
Well, if you're lucky, you're hearing him and not me.
Otherwise, we'll have to cuddle the whole show.
Right.
Not
Yeah,
too bad.
but in the comments, let us know if there's
If you can
anything
hear
wrong with the
the way-
audio, the volume, or anything else like that.
And just to sort of summarize again for everybody who's joined us a bit late on the YouTube live stream, we're at Rex Club upstairs from Barclay Rex in New York City. So I have the privilege of sitting next to my mentor and brother George, and we'll be touring the US together. Blind tasting, beautiful blind tasting for George. I know what it is because I picked the cigars from the humidor. But we wanted to share a little bit with you, not only about Barclay Rex and our experiences and impressions from the tour so far. Well, we're really only on to our second day, but quite interesting what we've seen so far. Yesterday, we started things off from Queens, heading to Matador
Yeah, we went to
Cigars.
Matador in Roslyn Heights, so we were out on Long Island, and that is the original Matador. They've since expanded to other locations, but again, a humidor that is really designed. It's packed. In other words, I don't want to say all things to all people. It's not like one of the superstores that you might see, but boy, it is jam packed with some pretty incredible inventory, and a lively, opinionated group of people who occupy the lounges and everything. But it was in a way, it's like Matador is an example of the need for modern cigar stores to have a space for their customers to relax and light up, and that's maybe the defining aspect of it's one of the things we were discussing yesterday is about the magnetic qualities that cigar stores have, the kinds of communities that they form. And if you're a traditional operator of a cigar store where you got a counter and you're maybe a walk-in or maybe cabinets, and people can only come in and buy them and say hi, hello, how are you, and go. In other words, if you can't host them, you're missing something from the modern cigar phenomenon.
What's also interesting is we spoke about this last night. The cigar lounge truly is one of the last resorts, or one of the last environments where you can truly hang out with, no matter if it's like-minded people or people who have a completely different opinion,
right?
But just grown-ups sitting down, enjoying.
Adults can
One
engage.
thing they have in common,
Yes,
which is the cigar,
right?
And can then embrace the moment, share the conviviality, have a discussion and an argument about God knows whatever, but in a very civilized manner, and
which is not an opportunity in very many other places, especially for the I think the redeeming quality of so many cigar shops is that they bring together across every economic, socioeconomic, ethnic, religious background. It's the place where people feel comfortable to come and look forward to having those conversations and sharing. In some instances, maybe being challenged, but it's really a dynamic, and you can't get that in a bar. Social clubs, by their very nature, are often restrictive in that aspect. In other words, they're specifically designed to organize a particular, whether it's let's say a caste. There's a different level, but cigar stores are the absolute last bastion of the most democratic opportunities. And I don't mean that by political parties. I mean by the traditional, the classical. It is really legitimately when the truth is that when you enter a cigar store, this is the great equalizer. This puts us on the same footing. And maybe I'm poor and broke and I'm smoking, the bargain in the humidor, and my friend Reinhard is smoking the Mercedes Benz of cigars, but we can still have great conversation and share our thoughts about it. And he can say, sorry for you, that's a shitty cigar and mine is fantastic, or whatever, but it keeps that going. And cigar stores are absolutely the place. This is now many years in the past, but this actually in the main store, the last iteration of Barclay Rex before this move here to Pearl Street, there was a couple of guys that met every single day of the week at the back lounge of Barclay Rex for a cigar and talk, and whether they talk about baseball or politics or whatever else. But one of the guys was a Wall Street financier, who was wearing very expensive suits and handmade Italian shoes and a fancy damn timekeeper on his wrist. And the other guy was actually a building engineer, elevator maintenance guy. And they were like thick as thieves. And they came together every single day to share a cigar. That kind of brotherhood is very, very rare to find anywhere outside of a cigar store.
And God knows, in today's day and age, that's probably more important than ever, that we find these spaces of community and camaraderie, even if we agree to disagree on a whole bunch of different topics.
Yeah.
And with the upcoming election, the US is certainly seeing challenging times where oftentimes it's about what separates us rather than what brings us together. But then again, that's what I love about having a good argument, and maybe something that we've lost in our society these days is to have an argument and share our various arguments and pros and cons.
I think,
and even if we don't agree, that's perfectly fine. But at least we can have a civilized
but I believe
conversation with each other.
that one of the reasons why this election is so fraught and why it's has so many people on edge is because we have lost the civil discourse aspect. Politics is so tribal now, and it's been driven to the point where I am not, I can't be a prominent spokesperson for a party if I am not completely dismissive of everything that my opponent has to say, and that you never give an inch. It's not it. They always used to say politics is a blood sport, but the truth is that we've gone past what the system was supposed to be, which is an exchange and compromise. The most successful administrations of the last 100 years that have accomplished great things and been, problem solvers for global problems, not just for domestic issues, are the presidents, examples probably from both parties, but mostly Democratic. But the leaders, the presidents who were compromise artists, who could bring people together. And by the way, in the last 100 years, most of the most successful presidents who practiced that art were actually cigar smokers. In some instances, they were kind of closet cigar smokers, but cigar smokers nonetheless. And they were, that was the, symbolic, I think, of their ability to reach across the aisle. That's not tolerated these days in the way things are. So hopefully we're going to get back. But at the very least, we have places to go to, meet and greet and share this and hopefully form some bonds that allow us to, as they say, reach across the aisle.
Shelley's back room.
Exactly. Well, by the way, Shelley's was named for the original cigar lounge at Shelley's first wood roast restaurant in Minnesota before, but when it came to DC and they, as things were starting to shift, Shelley was getting out of the picture himself. When the new owner said, no, we're not going to do the restaurants anymore. We're just going to do the back rooms. And in DC, Shelley's back room is essentially closer to the White House than it is to Capitol Hill, but it's situated between them, and it's the literal definition of a smoke-filled back room, which used to imply something wrong in politics. What I say is we need more smoke-filled back rooms because operators of the opposition parties could get together.
I've smoked with a lot of politicians there.
Oh, but the problem is in Shelley's there are not enough politicians. There are too many lobbyists.
Shelley's had the restaurant Shelley's had a restaurant there in Rockville for a while. Shelley's Wood Roast with the back room for the cigars,
which was a glorious place.
Oh, it was a great place, good food, and man, enjoy a cigar afterwards. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that location I think was essentially jinxed. It was cursed, and that was why. And because, by the way, there's 2 or 3 businesses that have been there since that time.
Since then,
but it was Shelley's. That restaurant in Rockville was supposed to be the prototype, proof of concept for expanding beyond his place in Wayzata, which he built as more or less as a tribute to his dad. And both those, the original Shelley's, not the one in Minnesota, but the one that was opened on Rockville Pike in outside DC, and the Shelley's back room, both used to be decorated with quite a few pictures of Shelley and I in various places, including Mexico and Cuba and Switzerland, right? And when the new owners made some changes, the expansion in the area, they took down all those glorious. I mean, because there were pictures of Shelley with his dad, he and his brother. It really had the hunting lodge vibe, and it was almost like the trophy room. It was so cool. It was so great. And now it's a different thing, which is it's all right, but it's believe me, it was never it never vibrated with that. Like, if you remember that place on Rockville Pike, the back room in there was an unbelievable clubhouse. What a great place that was.
Yeah, it was small, but it was a good place.
Yep.
One thing we wanted to talk about, George, is the sort of the current state of experiences, hospitality, and the vibe to be explored at today's cigar lounges or cigar stores, and probably how it also changed over time from when you started in the industry compared to what we're experiencing now.
Well, so, I mean, that your ancient history, but if you go back over 50 years to when I started, most of the cigar stores were sort of, they could be large or small, but they had their goods. Especially in those days, there were far, far more, cabinets. So you automatically meant, walk-in humidors were sort of walk-in humidors started to become prevalent in the 1970s, but before that, a cigar store was there was a service element about it. So your tobacconist was talking to you about the things that were there, but they were places where you would come in and maybe get some advice or ask some questions, have a little back and forth, buy your product and leave. But that's because people could smoke in their office, they could smoke in their home, they could smoke in their cars. There were, and they could go to restaurants, they could go to bars, they could go to their country clubs and smoke, and that was everywhere. So the idea that you had to have a cigar store as a place to enjoy it was completely foreign. Once the cigar boom of the 90s ignited and people started getting into the business and it became more and more, the response to that was two measures: smoking bans. In other words, the explosive success of premium cigars in that era brought on severe smoking bans and restrictions and higher taxes, both of which were designed to, but those are the modus operandi of killjoys. I used to call them the health Nazis, but you can't use that word anymore for reference in something common. But the industry quickly realized that if they were going to be moving forward and expanding their customer base, they had to provide a place for them to be. So now it's commonplace. It's much more unusual to find a thriving cigar store that actually doesn't have some hospitality aspect included in it. And one of the things that ends up doing is sort of diminishing the ability of center city and, in urban areas to offer, because the real estate is too expensive, unless you have the second big development in this, which is a liquor license, or at least a wine and beer license, so that you can make some money off providing beverages that have high margin to your customers and getting them happy. In other words, again, a cigar store operator, the more time that you can spend with your customers, the better off you are, both to build a relationship, to enhance their understanding of the things that you have, and also, in the mercenary aspect of what a shopkeeper is, to sell them more stuff. The longer they're around, and if you can give them the additional pleasure of having an adult beverage with it, now you've got the best of both worlds. Unfortunately, there are a lot of places, there are a lot of communities where it is completely and totally verboten to combine your vices. Like, oh my God, are you kidding? Smoke and drink in the same place? Oh,
that sounds
what's
good.
next? Right? And so, it's we can't let that happen. These people will be happy. That's not allowed. So. But what's happened, I think the advocacy movement, the modern trend, the fact that cigar store operators are doing better, the obvious visibility of well-heeled cigar fans, and the success of CRA in particular, has resulted in sophisticated pushback against all of these bans. And you see more and more townships and municipalities that are actually making exemptions for cigar bars.
Question on the hospitality aspect and the advent of more hospitality focused cigar concepts or environments. Do you think, because me coming from the hospitality background, you all know that I always argue, no matter which industry you're in, in essence, you're in hospitality.
That's right.
One way or another.
You are.
Even if you sell, maybe not the cheapest commodities, but as soon as you sell some kind of a product that needs a bit of a Fingerspitzengefühl with whatever you do, and has a certain value attached, there's a certain element of service and hospitality that comes with it in order to differentiate yourself from everybody else out there. Because products are interchangeable, right? You can have a great cigar here, or probably in the next store 3 blocks away from here. But what ultimately makes you come to Rex, for example, or Capital Cigar in Bethesda, or any of those great places, is because you're treated in a certain way. There's an element of experience and hospitality that you won't find in every other place. So do you think that the amalgamation of hospitality and cigar business also fueled the importance, or probably people's willingness or ability, whichever way you want to frame it, to offer a more hospitable service and experience in general?
Okay, so let's unpack some aspects of that. First of all, I think even if you're operating an old-fashioned cigar store where there isn't necessarily a lounge attached to it or even just a basic seating area, they still have to be hospitable because, as you said, there are plenty of people that sell cigars. You don't have to go to one particular outlet. You may need to because they have something special or one product, but overall, there are plenty of choices to go. So you must have some defining aspects, like, maybe it's that the guy that's behind the counter remembers all of his customers by name and has their choices cataloged and everything. Those are things that people respond to intuitively. Now, when it comes to operating a full-on lounge, my personal feeling is that the great challenge for all of these operators is staff and employee training. So think of it this way. An owner can say, man, I want the most welcoming vibe, and he can spend all his money on environment, making sure like Payam has in Capital, that the air handling is perfect and that the furniture is up to date and that everything is clean.
The lighting, the music.
Yes, exactly. So the ambiance, if you will, is all attentive. But if you can't make your staff recognize that their primary job is hospitality, right? So we always used to say you can teach cigar knowledge, but you can't teach grace and warmth and friendship. Those things are evident. The great operators are succeeding not because they have the most complete humidors or the most luxurious or even the best address, like where they're sited. It's about who the people are that work in there and how they treat their customers. It's in a great shop, it makes an impact to you. It's obvious when the people that work there are excited to see you walk through the door. They're happy. You've got this rapport going, and strangers who walk in the middle of that experience it indirectly because they go, oh, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a member. I don't want to be recognized that way. We have there's just people that come and they go, they got their little, oh, that's my chair, right? It's like, what are you doing sitting in my chair, right? And it's been fantastic. That's the kind of possessiveness that you strive for, that you want people to recognize. But I'm telling you, it is an art that, as you well know, for having worked in it for so long, it's not easy to achieve consistently because human nature is that people have ups and downs, right? In other words, your staff are no different than your customers. Some of them can be having a good day and some of them can be having a bad day. That's why I always encourage all management to post in the back room or the employee area that meetings will continue until morale improves, right? So, but the thing is that it's the pleasure, the satisfaction, like to me, working in a cigar store is a privilege because think about the environment that you're in. And here's something that I always try and drive home when I'm talking to people in shops. You're in a unique position because you're in a retail capacity, and your primary job is the exchange of goods for services. You need their money and they want your product. But the difference is that almost without exception, the customers who walk through the door of a cigar store, a cigar bar, or just a cigar lounge that doesn't necessarily have a liquor license are coming in to make themselves happy. Their mission for going there is to give themselves permission to enjoy one of life's great little luxuries. One of the things that that they get to do that makes themselves happy, because almost everywhere else they go, it doesn't matter where it is, I got to go shopping to get stuff for my kids to go back to school, or I got to buy, wherever they go, no matter whether the transaction is large or small, it's something that they must do. And it's not, it doesn't have the same reward. But when you go in a cigar store, it's like, hey, man, I'm going to pick this and I'm going to give myself the pleasure of my mini vacation where I get to sit back and light up my cigar. And if I want to read, or I want to listen to music, or I want to watch a little sports on the TV, I can do it on my own, in my own little bubble, enjoying myself, or I can enjoy the community. And the best hosts are the ones that are always fostering that sense of community. So they're introducing people, and they're putting people together. It's not just, hey, I got a new cigar for you to try. It's, did you meet so and so? He likes that cigar, you do, and both you guys play golf, whatever it is. I mean, they're hosting. They're making these the early stages of the bond, and then the customers find each other. That's fantastic. And again, like I said, outside of cigar stores, where do you go to have that happen? The truth is that there are fewer and fewer and fewer opportunities for things like that, especially that have the inspiration of meeting somebody that you wouldn't necessarily get in. I used to say this all the time when I would talk to people, that the guys that were downstairs here at Barclay Rex, the Wall Street, as we used to say, the master of the universe, and the guy who's a building engineer would never speak to each other if they passed on the street, and their lives wouldn't intersect. So a long time ago, what I used to say is a cigar store is the one place where a bank president and the auto mechanic can sit down and their peers, and they can exchange information with each other that they will mutually respect. Wow.
But that's where a lot of the owners of stores come in too, because there's a shop in Carmel, California. The shop is maybe 9 feet by 4 feet, 9 feet by 5 feet, but it's a destination. You can't smoke in there, or you can smoke in there, but there's no place to sit. But the owners make you feel welcome every time you come in, or if you go into a large store, it's how they receive you, and then you find your spot. But the thing that nobody has said yet, more business deals are done over a cigar than over liquor.
Well, it's also ones that get honored. Deals that get made at the bar over drinks are quickly. Did we lose his audio? He was saying something. Yeah. I agree, but the cigar industry is famous for, and it's mostly true these days. But for instance, I'll give you a great example. I used to say this is the last business where deals, you're smoking a cigar and sharing your time, and big players in the business don't even have to break bread, but they share time together, maybe just a cigar, and deals get written on a napkin and sealed with a handshake, and they stand the test of time, no matter how much money is involved. They honor their agreements at that level. Heller Merifel was a guy like that. I watched Heller do tobacco transactions with guys, and it was always a handshake. And both men were presenting their word as their bond, and they honored it. And everybody knew if you get that handshake and you make that deal, it's going to stand. Try and get that done anywhere else. I don't think it happens today. There's, and one side or the other is automatic. Oh, have you met my 15 friends? They're from the law firm O.E. Cheatham and Howe.
George, you made me think about one thing, and that is there are certain fundamental values or qualities that are hard to teach. Mm-hmm. And in the comments, you spoke about it. Educating your staff and giving them the right tools of training in order for them to be successful and a valuable and important part
of the team.
Is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it's time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
It's oftentimes the step before the recruiting aspect, which is so fundamentally important but so challenging at the same time. And obviously with certain generational shifts and people's fundamental beliefs and values being different than they used to be, I think every business now is struggling to get the right talent, retain that, and give them a platform to build a successful career for themselves. But another aspect that I just thought about, and I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but to me, the cigar always has a very old school vibe, and it almost feels like something that's fallen out of time, and there's something very very old school in having a cigar and having a drink and having a conversation with each other. Do you think that the sheer notion of enjoying a cigar sometimes sort of reminds us of those old values, or because of that perception, it sort of fuels people's you know what I'm trying to say, right?
I do. I think it goes farther back than you're implying an aspect of a tradition which might be 100 or 150 years old. I'm sorry, I left my top hat and my ascot in the dressing room. I'm portraying a man of the people today. But honestly, I think what this is, I swear to God, this is the modern day campfire. This is the thing that brings everybody around. A while ago, I called the cigar store the evolution of what they used to call the Cracker Barrel in the general store. Back in the days when this country and many others were just expanding, a general store served all kinds of purposes. But one of the things that they did was that they were literally the center of the community, as opposed to the bar, which was not as welcoming. But the Cracker Barrel was the place where there was, the barrels were there storing something, but people would meet around it and sit there, and that was the community exchange. Often those places were actually the post office. They were centers of the civic aspect. And believe me, those guys, there was always a jar that had cigars in it. There was another jar that might have had pipe tobacco in it, and guys would, again, the same thing. The economic strata could be different. One, a guy could walk in wearing a fancy suit and buy an expensive cigar, which would have been 10 cents then. And another guy would have a corncob pipe and spend 2 pennies for some tobacco for it, right? So it's always been I think this is the place where that kind of community gets built. But Danny, my friend Danny Marshall, the great humidor maker and a cigar pioneer in his own right, Danny said, no, it's the modern day campfire. It goes much farther back. It's one of the things that separates us is our social instinct of wanting to be together. So I just think we're lucky. And so to go back to your idea about hospitality and how much owners and operators have to invest in that, I believe that dynamic is one of the reasons why so many operators successfully recruit their best staff members from their customer base, because they're already enjoying a relationship with them, and they know that these people are passionate about the cigars, they're passionate about the aspect of the business, and they integrate effectively with the community that is there because they're already a member of that. They've elected themselves to come into that cigar store and its community, and so getting them to take out of that and elevate into staff status is product knowledge and maybe procedural stuff, but they've already got the hospitality aspect around because that's their That's their what they elected to be a part of anyway.
And at the same time, I sometimes find it a challenging proposition where people might think that being a good cigar smoker, whatever that is,
Makes them a good
cigar. It's cigar professional.
Nope. But so now let's take one half a step back. It's not bad to be a cigar geek. It's not bad to be engaged in who made it and how and what do they use and how old are they and how many of them were made and look how many I have or that kind of stuff. All of that's it's lovable. It's great. It's fantastic to enjoy, but recognizing and embracing the universal qualities, in other words, what the cigar actually fosters, which is beyond that collectible. Getting lost in the minutia is fine for trading one-upsmanship with your peers in the business about I know this and I know that and but that's not the same as embracing other people, like walk-ins to your business, whether it's a bar or just a regular old cigar shop, and getting them excited about your take on it as an operator, what you inventory, how you display it, why you have these choices, and how you guide people to interact with it. That's the challenging part, and that's why I said you can teach specifics and you can teach procedures too, so that people understand how to engage politely. But you can't teach the basic gene of understanding hospitality. You can recognize it and nurture it, and then it becomes something even more. But if you're not born with that outward aspect, it's not likely somebody else is going to implant it in you.
George and I yesterday, we visited a shop called Tobacco Road, very close to JFK Airport. And you said
if you're flying into anywhere in the Northeast, switch your flight so it goes to JFK, and take time, even if you're just transiting through, take time to leave the airport, go to Tobacco Road, and check this place out, because what we witnessed yesterday with the back and forth that Anthony Coppola, the guy who is the operator, it's phenomenal. I'm telling you, we spent a long time there because we were enjoying the back and forth with him. But believe me, it was, broken up in portions, and we would skip from subject to subject because he was always getting up to go greet whoever walked in and to interact with them in a little way, whether they were new or returning customers or, old regular stuff like that. He had this back and forth with everybody, which was, I'm telling you, absolutely exactly what we're talking about, which is that he was drawing everybody in from the minute that they arrived. And people walk in and they see that and they go, like I said, intuitively, when you walk in as a stranger and you're watching that happen, you're like, hey, how do I get, sign me up? How do I get into this little world?
I mean, besides, the Tobacco Road is situated in a relatively uninspired or not really fancy area. But then you pull up with the car, and immediately that one building completely stands out from the rest.
From all of its neighbors.
You open the door, you walk in, and immediately...
And your world has changed. You're in a completely different environment. Everything about the exterior is reassuring you that you're going to go into a well-run, what was the old phrase, a clean, well-lighted place. But once you walk in and you see, as you enter into this and look, you go, oh, wow, this is another level. And then the operator comes and says, hey, what the fuck are you doing? Get out. No, I mean, you get this. It's when you experience that, it puts such a contrast on other. You look and say, what's the competitive set going to be like? But when somebody like that emerges into a marketplace, and Tobacco Road is a relatively new entity, they immediately force everybody else to up their game. Because if you can't meet that level, both in terms of the physical setting, the quality of the inventory, and the way the staff interacts, for lack of a better word, with their customer. What I was about to say is the way they entertain, you're going to get crushed. You know, you're going to look around and go, where'd everybody go? And they go, it's easy. You go look at the parking lot of Tobacco Road. That's where everybody is.
Now, part of the reason I brought this up is Anthony was actually sitting next to a young gentleman he's training and mentoring who is not an avid cigar enthusiast yet. And you said something that I found very inspiring and on point as to how you can lure these people in and help them become part of the club.
Yeah.
In essence. And please talk a little bit about this, but in essence, your idea was to give them certain analogies of other things, products and industries that they know.
What you have to
cling on to.
What you have to go into is what's their area, what's their passion, what's their enthusiasm, what inspires them. So for instance, in his case, we were talking about sneakers, right? And it could be watches, it could be cars, it could be, beer, clothing, fashion, because clothing is utilitarian. Fashion is personality. It's statement. It's expressiveness. And the great thing is that, streetwear and fashion is no longer haute couture. Fashion today, the greatest and most dynamic fashion trends emerge from the ground up. It comes from the street, not from an atelier in Paris. Sorry, the ghost of Christian Dior. But anyway, the thing is that if you can find that topic, like when you listen, I do this all the time when I'm looking at the younger people in the lounge and stuff. I look and see if somebody's wearing a watch and it's not a smartwatch, which is generic and Johnny Ives, Apple engineered to look futuristic. But if they're wearing a watch, most of the time I think, okay, that person has that watch for a reason, right? And so that's an entree into exploring their interests and their enthusiasm. And once you get them thinking about what defines a great timepiece and why they chose it, how cool it is, whether it's the functions or a design appeal or anything like that. They're often making a personal statement. People are choosing, this is like the Omega that James Bond wore, or this is the Steve McQueen watch, or this is the Jacques Cousteau diving Rolex, or whatever. In other words, but they'll give you their relationship with it right there. Once you discover that and start getting them to unfold about their enthusiasm for it, and even maybe how they discovered it, like who taught them that there was value to a great watch as opposed to having a plastic piece of crap from. Once you do that, you can lead them through that into how sophisticated cigars are, and how tobacco and how tobacco and the complexities and the nuances of great tobacco are that you can do that. And it's the same, like I said, you sometimes with newer people in the business, I want to take them to a restaurant and say, look, here's what hospitality feels like. Look at the attention that you get. Look at all the details that they're paying attention to something as simple as what quality napkin it is, how well the glasses work, how often they pay attention to you, how they integrate you into that. And then you take them to some place that fails in that, and the contrast is apparent almost from the moment you walk in the door. And if you can get that, in other words, if you can make those connections across whatever the passion might be, then you have a pretty good chance at exploring how much they could learn about cigars, and they're off to the races.
May I ask you a question about hospitality? How do you feel when you walk into a nicely appointed lounge and you walk in the humidor and they say you can't go in the humidor without somebody there with you, and they don't let you touch the cigars, they follow you around and they have to pull the cigars for you? How do you feel about something like that in the lounge?
If there was a futures market on betting on the date that they would be out of business, I'd be in it. if they're acting as, first of all, I don't like the idea. A walk-in humidor is a great tool and an incredible resource for a retailer, but you have to manage them and curate the experience. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having an employee who's in there with you, as long as they're not sitting there acting like they're rearranging the cigars while they're spying on you. It should be inviting the conversation. And there are plenty of people who say, listen, I want to look around a little bit, and I don't know what I'm going to choose yet, and that they may be saying it in a way that invites reaction, which is the best possible result, or they could be saying in coded language, leave me the fuck alone, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to I'll find a cigar. But the idea that they're babysitting you to keep you from doing something untoward is not welcoming. It's not a good vibe. And like, for instance, I understand why some people might choose to do it, but I hate the idea of humidors that are locked up, and you have to, somebody has to give you access to it. Like, we're protecting Fort Knox here, and you can't go in. It's strange, because for most retailers, the walk-in humidor is their canvas. That's where they're painting. Here's my knowledge. These are my contacts. These are my relationships. You're literally seeing their beliefs on the shelf. And if you're restricting people's access to it, or you're putting yourself as the, interposing, like, you need my guidance to navigate this place, I don't think of that as welcoming. So for people that like block that prevent you from being able to go, like, for me, people say, how do you choose a cigar when you walk in a cigar store? I said, I go in and let the cigars talk to me. I let the appearance, the look, whether it's the shine of a wrapper or something else, so I'm not so worried about the box and everything else, but I let the cigars talk to me. That's where I get my feel like, oh, here's a cigar I really want to smoke, right? And if there's somebody that's hovering over you going, you know, what do you want, or anything like that, and the notion that you have to tell them what you want so they can pick it, and you don't get a chance to like, you pick up a cigar and feel, okay, I don't like this, it's been here too long, this guy doesn't run his humidification right, or he's worried about the ambient environment, and they may be over humidified and all that. Touch and feel tell you a lot about a cigar, and a cigar store by extension. And if somebody else is sitting there going, if I don't get to hold and evaluate that cigar myself before I pay for it, I'm like, okay, this is not really my hang. I'm not here. Does that not only was that the dollar answer to your 5 cent question, or did I miss the point?
Well, no, there's a shop that I used to go to in Washington, and Washington State, not DC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it used to be a great Highline shop. As a matter of fact, it's where I started part of my career in the cigar industry. And they've redone it, and the new owner has made it so that you're not allowed in the humidor without somebody guiding you through it. And the cabinets in the humidor are all locked, and they have a key, and they've got to unlock it and give you a cigar in a basket they don't let you touch or feel. It's to me very offensive. It's a shop that I will never go back into.
Well, but there's so in their defense, the one thing that I will say is this. I love cabinets. Remember, I've worked in shops that have it both ways. The thing about having a cabinet which is closed, whether it's locked or not, can be, it depends on the environment that you're in. Sometimes there's reasons that people are defending themselves from theft and damage and loss and stuff like that. But if you have a cabinet that means that the employee has to go and open it up, the one thing that you're doing is guaranteeing that there's going to be some level of exchange with the customers. But if the guy is like a jailer and he's like, no, you can't touch that, and I'll let you know if that's it, and going through that. In other words, if the employee is the difference between, oh wow, good eye for you, I'm glad you saw these, because we don't really have them positioned the same way. This is one of my favorite smokes, and you should try it here. And they hold the box for you, and you get to look at it. All of that is really good, because the more personal contact there is, the better. But if the vibe instead is, I'll pick it, don't you touch it, you've missed the boat on the aspect of the personal choice involved in, wanting a cigar and wanting to go into a store. And if they, like I said, if they're interposing themselves in that chain, then it's a fail. And I believe that either, they'll look around and, like I said, where'd everybody go? They're your competitor across town, where everybody can walk in and enjoy, have some time and make a decision. Like, there are a lot of times I'll pick up a cigar in a cigar store and go, this is what I want to buy. I'm going to smoke it, and then I'm looking around in the rest of the place, and they go, oh, wait a minute, look at this and this and this. And I end up, reward. But if I got the cigar that I'm going to smoke because the employee went in and picked it out and said here and everything else, he's automatically cut my time there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to reward him by going around and saying, hey, let me pick 5 other things. That ain't working.
Yeah, you just feel pressured. At least I felt pressured in the store, so I won't go back.
Yeah. And it's a cigar store. Again, remember back to what I was saying earlier, is that this is the moment when you're giving yourself a break. You're giving yourself that little reward. Okay, here's my daily mini vacation. I get to sit down and spend 40 minutes smoking my favorite little cigar at whatever break. And if somebody else screws that vibe up because they're going, you're not allowed to make this selection, I have to do it for you. Dude, you've missed the point.
Talk a little bit about the cigar, George, since we're doing blind tasting here, or at least George does.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts so far?
Well, because I was talking, it did go out, but I love the way it burns and draws. I will say this: I'm now, approaching the midpoint of the cigar. It opened up with a lot of very interesting and original flavors that were. It was good, my taste buds were peaked, and I was like, okay, what's happening here? And then it sort of dumbed down a little bit, and it settled into a mid-range flavor that's very nice. But
I felt it was very bright to begin with, particularly on the retrohale.
But it lost it.
It had a lot of vibrance, a tremendous presence with a firm grip on the retro. Very distinct. The taste profile I find to be relatively earthy in its core.
With a little bit of leather.
Yeah,
a little
absolutely.
bit of leather.
Very characterful, but particularly that bright retrohale gave it a beautiful zing and
all the white pepper notes, all of the real sort of piquant spice notes emerge on the retro, but it also, that wakes up the rest of your palate when you do that, which is, that's the virtue of retrohale anyway, because it's telling you a lot about. So, for instance, one of the takes that I have, bless you, one of the takes that I have is that I think that from the way this cigar started, I was thinking one thing about how mature and how deep the tobacco was. It feels younger and brighter and more forward than I originally assumed from like the first, say, 10 or 15% of the cigar. Now it has settled down into something which is I don't want to say less complex, but less vibrant. There's fewer things happening. In other words, I think it reached a personality and it's living in that. What I'm hoping is that there's a turn. I'm hoping that this
an evolution.
Yeah, that there's a new set of flavors that come in. Because interestingly enough, again, like I said, I thought the cold draw and the cold aromas were a little bit on the flat, sort of asleep side. I actually wondered if this cigar was a dumb period at first, and then I lit it, and it was bright and vibrant. There were some very interesting. They weren't floral notes per se, but they were, almost like
Right.
Yes. And unless you are retrohaling, that's not happening right now at this stage of the cigar. Does that make sense?
Very much.
And I'm not saying that I'm not. I mean, this is a more than enjoyable cigar. It has some great. But what I'm waiting for is the combination of that, that earthy, nutty. I'm hoping that it goes into more barnyard, right? More funk and more like, okay, uh, uh, a new level of richness.
It's not very creamy or mellow. Quite the opposite. I find it to be quite pronounced and with with a lot of a meaty, earthy grip to it.
Yeah, I don't know that I certainly wouldn't call it mellow, but I would say it's pretty well behaved. But creamy, absolutely not. So it's not floral, it's not citrus, it's not creamy. Which means when you're talking about that, it's at the drier end of the spectrum. And so now the question is, are there going to be other aspects that mitigate that dryness? Or because, by the way, what's it doing to your palate? Are you getting a little drying sensation on the edge of your palate?
It certainly does. I mean, it it also produces quite a bit of saliva, so it's not where you
So it's
you
doing both. It's
yes,
doing both, because which is okay. That means it's a successful combination. That the blend is working as it should. Which is, if it's causing parts of your palate to salivate, and at the same time you're experiencing other drying, there's things that are going on. In other words, the tobacco is actually at work trying to produce an experience. And by the way, look at the color of the ash and the very 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 narrow mascara line. This is beautiful. There's not a bubble. It's not this is not a cigar that's like, oh yeah, it was made yesterday. By an amateur cigar maker.
One
This is
thing about
beautifully
the ash
done.
that I recognize, it's relatively flaky.
Mhm.
It's not a very firm and stable ash.
Well, yeah. Look at the top of mine. It's like it's almost exploded, right?
What would you attribute that to? Because the color of the ash is more a consequence of the completeness of the combustion and certain nutrients or certain mineral components that you have in the soil.
The whiter the ash, the higher the magnesium content in the soil. But interestingly enough, that can go both ways, right? So I think one of the things that happens is that you have a dramatic difference in the soil makeup of where the wrapper was grown versus where the fillers were grown. And sometimes that can be a personality split, right? In other words, the body of the cigar is one thing and the wrapper is giving you something else. Flakiness, I find, as a general rule, I find flakiness to have more to do with the
construction.
no, with the actual moisture content of the elements and how well they're harmonized. So think about, if you see flaking a lot of times, it's because the weight of the wrapper is drastically different than the binder and some of the filler components, right? So essentially, the lighter, thinner, more delicate uh, ash that is a result of the wrapper is falling away, where the binder and wrapper, binder and filler tobacco are holding their form, right? And so one of the things when you start to see a lot of that often is, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe these weren't actually rested as long as they should be, so that all of those elements are harmonized, right? In other words, that they've reached equilibrium. I don't think these cigars are not young.
Not at all. But when you talk about the different components of the cigar and the different tobaccos finding together and finding that harmony, you're talking about,
by the way,
when they're assembled or just after assembly,
no,
not
after
necessarily
assembly.
how they've spent in the downstairs humidor, for example.
Well, yeah, but don't forget that the manufacturer has a responsibility to rest the rolled product before it gets packaged and shipped. So theoretically, those various elements should have come together and reached a state of equilibrium that means that it's safe to ship them and that a retailer can open them. some retailers are very obsessive. They want to take their inventory and acclimate it. They want to make sure that it's ready to put on the shelf so that as you pick it up and light it up right away, you know everything is going to be fine. You're totally reassured about that. And there are other people that like rip open the box from UPS and put it on the shelf, and that's it. And depending upon the time of year and where you are, transportation can have travel shock in cigars is a very real phenomena. In other words, there are many, many times when you look and go, wow, this is a beautiful cigar, but it was not ready to smoke. And it's the tobacconist's job to evaluate that and to keep you from making a bad choice. That's where the guy that has the lock and key for the cabinet comes into play. He should be like, nah, you don't want to smoke that yet. Come back next week and they'll be ready to light up. And if he saves you from having a frustrating cigar experience, that's all great. But if he just goes, yeah, sure, it's the luck of the draw, chump, pick that out if you want, and goodbye and good luck. No, a tobacconist should be your guide through that, and they should be able to recognize. Now, I'm not saying, in these days, you walk in a good walk-in humidor, there's 400 plus facings in there, and it's highly unlikely that the clerk has smoked every one of them and is familiar. But on the other hand, when something new and hot and sexy comes in, and it's been rated or reviewed recently, and everybody wants to talk about it, you better be really well aware of the condition of that product that came in, because when that happens, when a cigar becomes a bust out cigar because it got a great rating, all kinds of people are going to want to come in and buy it and smoke it. And they're going to come from, a wide variety of preferences on their own, and maybe a wide variety of experience level in enjoying it. And they're going to say, oh my God, this cigar got a 95 rating, and they said it had, this and that flavor, and I got to taste that. And then what they light up is either not ready, too young, or it's outside the range of what they're comfortable. Listen, there's a lot of people who will tell you that they, I only smoke Cubans and Opus X, and then when they walk in the humidor, they pick a Romeo and Julieta with a Connecticut wrapper, right? And I'm not that there's anything wrong with that, but they say one thing and they do another. And one of the jobs of a tobacconist is to be able to guide somebody and say, oh, so you like this, why don't you try this? Because it's really in your neighborhood flavor wise, but check this out. It's going to do something different for you in this. And those are the guys that can really, really make a difference in your pleasure and enjoyment. And they're, the more familiar they are with everything in their humidor, then they're skilled enough to say, man, I think you're missing this. You've overlooked this cigar. It's not the sexy new thing, but I think you might like it better than this cigar that just got rated 95 because the cigar snobs say it has Cuban-esque flavors.
One thing that I'm registering now is that even though the retrohale is brighter again, there's an added layer of complexity in the aromatic delivery. Is sort of a baking spice note on the retro. Not only that white pepper, crisp, bright, tingling sensation, but a much wider, broader spectrum of qualities on the retrohale.
It's interesting. Remember, I was saying I was waiting for something else to happen. Here I am at essentially, as almost the midpoint of this cigar. There's a yeasty quality to this that was not present before, and that sort of goes hand in hand with baking spices very often. But this cigar is showing me some new flavors right now that I'm glad of. Right, because it's not. Let's put it this way too. It's not a boring cigar. It's showing me things that weren't there.
George, I wanted to briefly talk about the curation of the humidor as well. Mm-hmm. We spoke about the hospitality aspect, but we've experienced drastically different inventory levels and presentation
Yeah.
across the humidors that we saw yesterday
Mhm.
and today.
Yeah.
With obviously Matador having an interesting selection. Then Tobacco Road. In the evening, we visited Casa del Tobacco in Newark, which is another fabulous store, and they already opened another location in Sparta and are about to open Park Ridge.
Another, third location in Park Ridge.
And then today we saw Barclay Rex's selection downstairs. Talk a little bit about those different experiences, but also what in your opinion makes a great selection, and how broad do you have to be in your selection in order to offer quality humidor experience to your customer? So what are sort of things that you're looking at in terms of having something to offer for every palate and every customer, even price point, of course, who walks in, but finding that balance and that middle ground between just trying to be everything to everybody and having a well curated portfolio with a clear signature or fingerprint, if that makes sense.
It's a greater challenge to offer a curated humidor than it is to offer, I got A to Z. Because having many selections often goes with the self-service ethic. It's like I put them all in there, and I got as much crammed in this space as I can, and go in and look and land on what you're interested in on your own, and that's kind of a potluck approach, and I don't necessarily know. Whereas a retailer that has established, so think of it this way. Matador is a classic space. He's got real estate issues, space, right? So there's a tremendous amount of inventory crammed in a relatively small footprint. There are some things that are prominently featured, but most of it is it's there, and the better you know it as a customer, the more you can go and zone in on the things that you're interested in getting. Contrast that with Tobacco Road, which has more room, and it's in a different neighborhood, a different place, but there's more room. There's still a tremendous amount of inventory in there, and if you can't find a cigar. By the way, this is absolutely true in Matador. If you go on Tobacco Road and you can't find a cigar that you're looking at and go, oh, I want to smoke that,
you better stop.
You didn't really want to smoke a cigar in the first place. It's like, no. But then take it the next level to, or the next interpretation, let's say, of how you build a humidor, to look at Casa del Tobacco in Newark. That's a very theatrical humidor. There are, the positioning of the products that's in there is designed to put your focus on certain things right away, and then the things that are adjacent to it, and everything. And in a way, when you have that, what the owner is doing is sort of giving you a little bit of a tease, and they're luring you into interacting with their product, and how you respond to those. Incredibly impressive display of impossible to find cigars. And once you are engaged with something like that, then the staff can come right in and say, oh, okay, well, and lead you through some of the other things that are there. And it's that, I think, often is representative of the personality of the operator. In other words, listen, I know these guys, and I've been involved with them, and I have things of theirs that nobody knows about, or nobody has the aspect to get. Like, think about how proud Anthony was in showing us the special stuff that he had from Jeremy, from Castagni, right? Those were remarkable, and the thing is that as an owner, what you can't do is fall in love with the things that only you prefer. Your business is to offer a broad portfolio so that you can cater to the expressed interests of the customer that are coming in. If what you're trying to do is get him only to smoke the things that you've fallen in love with, you're not going to get the most out of that relationship, in other words, because they may say, oh yeah, well, when I want to, I'll go in and indulge myself with the thing that he's, got me buying. And then you walk out and go, wow, I didn't realize I spent that much money or something like that. And that might affect how fast you go back to that place. Whereas in another place you look and you go, man, the next time I'm feeling flush, I want to buy that $50 cigar. But today I was happy buying a $20 cigar, and it's all good. You didn't feel like, the guy with the key was sitting there saying, don't you want this? It's like your friend won't have it. And I'm not an advocate for high pressure selling in that. I want to turn people on to exciting stuff, regardless of the price point. Like sometimes my joy is taking somebody who's a cigar snob and introducing them to an $8 cigar that they've completely overlooked. And they go, wow, this is really nice. It's really lovely. I go, see, you don't have to smoke the band every time. You can actually smoke the cigar. But curation is the challenge, because to my way of thinking, you want your humidor to express the personality and the passion and the enthusiasm and maybe even sometimes the professional relationships of the operator, but you want to have room for the customer to come in and say, oh, wow, I didn't know you had this and I've heard about it. Can I try that? What's the story? And the guy goes, no, that's a mild cigar and you like big, powerful cigars, or the other way around, you're a cigar wimp and this is, or in other words, you invite that response by how you've presented these things. And if you know your customer well enough, you can really guide them through. And sometimes you can say listen, this is a cigar that guys that like really old fashioned, classic, mellow, mild cigars that stay the same all the way through. Don't buy this cigar, which is like an exploding firecracker. It's a Roman candle that's giving you new flavors every other puff, and it's not going to be what you want.
How do you balance, and you work as a consultant for various different operators, tobacconists, lounges. How do you balance catering to the audience that you have, or offering an experience suitable to the neighborhood you're in, versus offering something different, trying to guide them on a different path, and offering something that's more representative of you as an operator?
Remember what I said to you yesterday about the winning advice that I got from a cigar rep more than 50 years ago? He said there's only two kinds of cigars, those that sell and those that don't. And as long as you have more of the former rather than the latter, you're going to be okay. The truth is that maybe the way your humidor has to be laid out is 80-20. So it's 80% the inventory that is going to allow you to satisfy the majority of the demands of the customer base that you already have, whether you inherited it or built it yourself. And the 20% is designed to show these guys some new paths, some new directions, some new flavors, or a new manufacturer. Listen, you can be excited to say, wow, I don't know where this guy came from. I mean, think about Pete Johnson, in Tatuaje. When he came on the scene, people were like, what? Who's this guy and what's the story and where'd this come from? We don't know anything about it. And even the factory that was making them was a new entity, and in a tiny little, it was essentially a shinshal, it was a sweatshop, and it didn't have anywhere near the presence that they have now. But overnight, people were like, wow, this is an incredible cigar. They were like, the response was really breathtaking, right? And since then, there are probably no less than 20 brands that have tried to mimic that sort of out of nowhere boutique personality of, I'm the new kid on the block, and I didn't grow up in the tobacco patch, but my God, I've got a taste and a sensibility, and I think there are more than a few companies that have focused on creating a culture around the enjoyment of their brand less than they have on a defining personality for the tobacco products that they make. There's a reason why many, if not most, of the greatest cigars in the world all had relatively plain, unassuming bands, and they came in Boîte Nature, slide top, classic cedar boxes. That's just it. It was just like, here it is. This is what we got. This is what we make. Try one and see what you think. And you go, oh my God. Whereas a cigar that comes in outrageously complex packaging with a band that covers up, 75% of the wrapper area has a lot to live up to, because everything about the trade dress is promising something. And if it doesn't deliver, then you go, it's a little bit of an empty suit, And which is that's not to take anything away from, like cigar marketing and packaging. The presentation is at such a high level. I mean, we're in an absolutely the golden age of cigar imagery. It's extraordinary.
Do you think that's a consequence of the evolution of the industry?
Cigar aficionado.
Yeah, well, that as well, for sure. But also, we know that people's attention span is pretty much down to a couple seconds now. Mm-hmm. There's so many great choices in most humidors around the country,
and you better make yourself visible. You better make yourself visible, and not only that, the promise of the personality that all of that is evoking has to be, I think, to be a success, to connect with consumers, has to stay consistent. In other words, it can't be, oh my God, here's the flashiest packaging in the world. We're a different color. We've got this unusual band or anything like that. And then the cigar that's in that presentation is like, oh, this is your grandfather's Dominican cigar. No. If you do that, then there's a disconnect, and the consumer might not recognize it overtly or be able to put their finger on it, but their reaction will be not necessarily disappointment, because it could be a perfectly good cigar, but not the excitement and enthusiasm to become a brand ambassador and to say, my God, man, you got to try this cigar. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
George, before we wrap things up, before we come to a close, I want to briefly talk about the cigar again, and maybe you could share some thoughts on how it evolved with time, and then we can maybe have our guys and our gals chime in and share their thoughts about what they think of smoking, before I'll give you the big revelation.
Well, so look at this. The cigar is beautiful. Look at that ash. Look at the ash and the burn and everything else. And it's been super well behaved the whole time. It draws lovely. And it has, I will say this, as new aspects of the flavor have come on and presented themselves, and the cigar's personality has evolved, the aroma really hasn't. The aromas of this cigar have basically stayed the same from the moment that we lit it. And they're, warm and toasty. They definitely shade towards the earthy side. One thing I'll say about this, I sort of expected that it was going to go, that maybe there were going to be some honeyed and slightly sweeter tobacco notes. They're all gone. None. It does not exist. And I also thought, based on something that it did, like at about the 1/3 mark, as I got towards the halfway point, I thought that it was going to go more barnyard and more funky, and that it was going to, expand and give me some properties that would, not necessarily take me by surprise, but delight me by the evolution. That hasn't really happened. But the flavors are, they're satisfying. They're not overpowering. It's not. I'm not smoking this cigar and I feel like the Russian army walked through my mouth in their sock feet. It's not. It's not dominant in that respect, and it also hasn't gripped my. Sometimes you smoke and it's like the way your palate is experienced. It feels like drinking a super young tannic red wine. Where it's like, and you're all tightened. This is a satisfying, mellow cigar. An accomplished cigar maker The construction is good. The presentation. By the way, did you notice the cap was beautifully done? It was a Verpass at a triple cap.
It struck me as quite powerful in the beginning,
but then
I
calmed down.
Much calmer now.
Yeah, it went from a cigar that promised power to be something that's a finesse smoke.
Does it ring any bells or anything that rings familiar with it in terms of the tobaccos or the style of blending?
Well, the interesting thing is that in terms of the overall body of the cigar, it feels more like a Dominican cigar. But in terms of the spice and flavor notes,
leans more towards Nicaragua.
Absolutely.
What about the wrapper? From the appearance to the way it smokes and what you're registering?
Well, I was thinking that it was not by aroma, but I was thinking by, the grain and the quality that it was, a Mexican.
Any thoughts from the audience?
His description reminds me of a San Lutano Oval. And the Habano, which is Ecuadorian.
Yeah.
Close to Mexican.
But Ecuador, it could easily be an Ecuador wrapper based on the color range, the degree of oiliness that it has, and the closeness of the grain. But you can't really see this in as you guys are looking at it. But in terms of the texture, it has some of the grain qualities that San Andres has, which is a Sumatra seed. In other words, it's a cousin to Cameroon. It doesn't have the bumpiness or the tooth that classic Cameroon wrapper has, but in grain structure, and mostly in Ecuador, I see, depending upon the seed type, of course, but I see it's more an open structure rather than tight, and the very small veins in this. This is a well sorted product. And the only thing is that I agree that in terms of the flavor components and stuff like that, San Lotano is a style that sort of speaks to what I was describing. But the San Lotanos are that oval shape. It's not really a classic trunk press. It's that sort of weird hybrid of semi-squash but rounded edges. This is much more to the Padron standard of
and probably what we would have experienced would be a more pronounced pepper spice.
You would have more of the forward, exactly. You would have more of the forward Nicaraguan, like frontal assault on your palate. And this cigar has come to us, and we've allowed it to, develop and express itself. It didn't jump up and pound us in the chest and go, "We're smoking now."
Well, you hit a lot of points on the head, so time to reveal.
So it's a foundation, right? Huehuenza, yes.
Wise men.
And so the interesting thing about this is that this is the new iteration of Wise Man that's made by Pepin, not the old one, which was made in a different factory.
I'm actually wondering how long they had these sitting on the shelf downstairs.
Yeah, because it doesn't smoke like the Pepin version.
That is true.
A different band. The Pepin version has almost like a cross on it.
I very much believe this is the old one.
That's the original. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the old one. And
which is discontinued.
Look in the chat.
If I'm not mistaken.
Say it again.
Sorry, I had to interrupt. I said, look in the chat. It's people saying this is the old one. AJ Fernandez.
Yeah.
Oh, in the chat.
This is the original AJ Fernandez made by. So this is the Maduro one. It's not, the Pepin is a different band, and they don't call them anymore different. They're the same name.
Yeah.
So, if I'm not mistaken, this has a Mexican San Andres.
It does have a San Andres wrapper.
for a Corojo binder and Nicaraguan
Yeah.
fillers.
Sure. But really, really well balanced. This is like I said, it's a sophisticated cigar making experiment because they're bringing different components. The Corojo really contributes the aroma that we're experiencing, and it's well behaved. It's subtle. Typically, I think you get a little bit more floral notes out of Corojo, but I think that's because the fillers are dominating that aspect of the aroma. But man, if I had this as a blend and I was doing it, I wouldn't necessarily go looking for a different one, right?
Sure. What an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
Hey, George, did you ever get the picture I sent you in Messenger that you wanted? With you and Mike and Lito?
Yes, which I loved. I actually I put my phone away so I wouldn't be distracted while we were doing this, but yes, I did, and I loved it. It was great, and we're looking forward to seeing Lito again in spring. We're honestly, I think relationships are one of the things that keep people bound to this industry. Finding how great and how open the cigar makers are. There have been people in this business who achieved a certain amount of acclaim, and people were excited by what they did, but they were very secretive. Like, oh, I have tobaccos that nobody else can get, or nobody can see. What I'm doing in my factory and everything. And most of those guys are gone, right? In other words, the more you tell people no one in the world can do what I do and stuff like that, it sounds like a presidential candidate, not a cigar maker.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the cigar makers that are sitting there saying, yeah, I was able to make good cigars that made me happy when I was buying tobacco from so and so and so and so. I was just taking what was in the marketplace, and the guys that have said, listen, man, I wanted to make particular flavors, and so I started my own farms, and I'm growing my own seed types, and now I have some new hybrids, and I'm affecting everything about the process. In other words, my fermentation techniques are slightly different, and how long I rest them, and then what I do to resort and re-ferment filler components or binder is changing the business. And Lito's a classic example of that. By the way, do you ever hear there's something that Don Carlos said about Lito years and years ago, when Lito was still sort of like the bright new kid in the Dominican Republic. And Don Carlos said, don't show him your thumb, he'll learn your whole arm. Right? He's just like this unbelievable sponge, and he's always taking these things and applying it to the things that he can control. That means he can raise something and offer a product. And I, listen, Pepin, the things that he's done at his farm. But and truth be told, AJ had the product that he's cultivated has produced some flavors that are unrivaled, that nobody can take. And the guy that taught all these people about that was the original master of, I can take the tobacco you buy, re-ferment it and sort it and work it the way I want and produce a cigar that tastes nothing like anything you do, even though we bought tobacco from the same farmers. And that's Jose Orlando Padron. He was the master of transformation. And he taught everybody it's possible to make a cigar in Nicaragua using broadly available Nicaraguan tobacco that tastes unlike anything else in the market. And people would be like, how is it possible that me and him are, access to the same raw material, and this fucking wizard changes it? So, God bless for people like that. Hanky Kellner and Eladio exploited.
Menendez.
Yes, well, yeah, the original master,
Yeah.
the teacher of teachers, and the last living link to the golden age of Havana tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
George, many, many thanks for a very enjoyable and inspiring show today.
Well,
Great
thanks for the
pleasure.
opportunity, but also thanks for all of you guys for listening and for sharing your feedback and your reactions and your stories. It only works as a two-way street. It's not about necessarily what everything we have to say. It's about how it lands with you and what it reminds you of.
Just a quick comment on next week's show. There's going to be the time shift in Europe, not yet in the US.
Right.
So for housekeeping rules for everybody joining us from the US, next week we'll be on an hour early, 1 p.m. on the East Coast, whereas we keep the same timing for Europe and the UK with 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. We have a very full show coming up next week. We'll have Pete Johnson joining us for a little Halloween special, and we'll talk about the Monster Series.
Yeah.
And some of his great accomplishments with that. So,
and we'll be doing it from another upstairs lounge around a great retailer, Old Virginia Tobacco. So
OVTC, yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Next week, I want to say same time, same station, but it's going to be a different station,
Yeah,
and a slightly different timing for all of you joining us from the US. Until then, you all be safe, be well, take care of yourselves. Light them up.
Yeah, but and lock and load your questions for Pete. You know, so because he's the guy that's always willing to share. You know, it's not about secrets. So he's a generous guy when that comes to. So think about it. Thank you all for joining us very much. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Reinhard.
Great show as always.
yeah.
Thank you, guys.